The same reason we like food that's bad for us, we like games that aren't necessarily good for us. They can scratch a particular itch. You have ultimate flexibility in the digital space, like you could be a flying whale or whatever you want to be. That core of play is something that's very innate to a lot of life. I have pets, and they totally understand play. They don't think you're trying to kill them. They're like, oh, I get this. You're pretending that you're trying to get me. They get it. It's one thing I think about games is they don't need to be an escape. They can be the opposite. They can be an engagement, like a deeper engagement with people. So games are categorized as an escape from reality, but they don't always have to be like that.
This is the Human Future Podcast, where we explore the intersection of technology and spirituality with some of the world's brightest minds. Together, we paint a vision of the desirable future and discuss the actionable steps to make that vision a reality. And now, without further ado, let's begin.
Today's guest is John Krajewski, a game developer and a co-founder of Strange Loop Games, the company behind the virtual world game Eco. Eco is more than just a game. It's a virtual ecosystem that teaches players about ecological balance and the complexities of societal structures, fostering environmental awareness, collective decision-making, and a deeper understanding of the intricate systems that govern our world. During our conversation, we explore the intersection of virtual worlds, gaming, metaverse, with spirituality and human connection. We also talked about the impact of gaming on learning, the potential of games as a tool for exploring complex societal structures, and evolving topics of AI and its implications for human interaction and the future of digital experiences. I hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome. Thank you, man, for being here. This is it's going to be I'm excited for this conversation. As I was doing research, as I mentioned to you, well, you're the first person that I interview on this podcast who have the background that you do, specifically around virtual worlds, simulation, gaming, metaverse, those topics, and I'm excited to see, to dive deeper into those topics and also see if there are any connection or relationship with, as I mentioned to you, like spirituality is a big component to what I'm interested in. Technology has been one of them, the two pillars in building the future that we want. I understand that maybe you're not necessarily an expert in the topics of like spiritual topics or consciousness topics, but this would be my job to see if there are connections or perspective that you might have that some novel perspective or something like that.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think a good place to start is for you to just give me a little bit of your background. So who is John? How would you say who is John?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm John. I'm a game developer. I own a game studio called Strange Loop Games with my co-founder, and we make a virtual world game, this living online world game. My background is I used to work at EA, Electronic Arts, this game company for several years. I've been in the game industry for a while, and I've just been making games since I was a kid. I was always passionate about it since I was like 6, programming on the Commodore 64 with my dad. Yeah, for me, it's always been, a passion and something that is like endlessly interesting and advancing and progressing and connects to technology and art. And it's just such a good thread to kind of connect to everything.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then tell me about the project or game, or because the name of the company is not Eco. Eco is the name of the game of the project. So tell me more, because that one is really exciting, actually.
Yeah, so Strange Loop Games is the name of the company. Yeah. So we were founded in 2009. Yeah. So we've been around a while now. Me and I had a partner from EA, a colleague that we joined forces. He does the art side. I kind of do the coding and design.
Oh, cool.
And we've made 6 games. First game was Vessel, which was like a labor of love. And it was kind of, earlier days in the game industry, they didn't have the out-of-the-box engines like they did now. So we had to build the whole engine ourselves. Wow. Now you could just download it for free.
For sure.
So,
Right.
Yeah, so the industry's really changed a lot over these years. But Eco's been our biggest success. I think we kind of distilled things we learned from the other games and put it into that one. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest being think about your how it's going to market itself and like how it's going to be viral through the design. Because you make it so that people want to share it with their friends, or that it's interesting to watch on Twitch, and you really got to build that in the game, because it's such a crowded market now. Like, it's so easy to make games, which is awesome, but on the flip side, there's like a million games coming out every single day, so trying to stand out in that is a challenge.
Right. Is there a common thread of all of the games that you worked on, like underlying theme of the area of the type of games?
I think it would be like systems based. I mean, that kind of goes to the idea of like the origin of our name, Strange Loop. Strange Loop is this concept of like a self-referential system where like you go a layer deeper and you're like at a layer above, and like it kind of understands itself. It's this this almost theory of like consciousness as well, of like how you understand yourself, this self-referential connection. So I kind of reflect that in the games of like, these are living systems. These are systems like Eco has an ecology system where it's simulating plants and animals that you're interacting with. Has like an economy and a government where the players are actually running it. So they're like part of this simulation, the system, and they have to like navigate that and figure it out. So that would probably be the common thread. And it's also kind of connected us to educational games. So we actually got a grant from Department of Education to build Eco.
Very cool.
And we've done a few contract projects. We did a cell biology game where you're inside a cell exploring it. And it's this little nanoroobot. And an algebra game, multiplayer, like competitive game that was actually pretty cool. I think there's a deep connection there between like play and learning, so it just kind of naturally fit. Like, we want to make these systems that are warrant a lot of exploration. They're based on like reality and interesting things, and then let players kind of discover and like self-guide their learning and understand these systems.
Interesting. Now that I think about it, so you made a distinction, play and learn, and I know that sometimes someone might have an argument of games are just a waste of time. So maybe they're referring to the part of the game that doesn't include much learning. You're just I don't know. If are you just playing then, or is that something completely different? You're just...
Yeah, I would agree. A lot of games kind of are a waste of time at some point. Yeah. It's really a matter of like, a lot of movies, a lot of TV is a waste of time. But then there's movies that'll like change your life, right? Like incredible works of art, or they just like, you see the world in a different way. And games are a medium just like that. So I don't think people should really write off games like that, even though, the most popular ones, you're like blasting each other in the face and like cursing on your microphone to each other. Yeah. But there's so many games out there that are like, deep explorations of like your human psyche, or like really cool narratives, or like systems like our games. So I think it really depends a lot on what the game is and how much, what is the value that it brings to you. What if you play the game, how does it apply to the rest of your life? What does it give you in the rest of your life? Right. And a big aspect of that is social. So like if you're playing with friends, like, well, now you instantly have a connection. But also systems, I think. Like you're exploring this ecosystem. You're like, oh, I understand how this works. I recognize this in the bigger world too. So yeah.
Yeah, because I think even since we were like primitive humans or monkeys, play was definitely part of the process, and play was very useful to practice maybe coordination, learning. It was all about up-leveling your skills of navigating reality in the way.
Yeah, exactly.
But I feel like in video games, when speaking to the waste in time component, it got introduced somewhere along the way, maybe.
Yeah, it's kind of like the same reason we like food that's bad for us. We like games that aren't necessarily good for us. They kind of scratch a particular itch, I think. But that core of play is something that's very like innate to a lot of life. Like I have pets, and like they totally understand play. Like you chase them around. Right. They don't think you're trying to kill them. They're like, oh, I get this. You're pretending that you're trying to get me. Right. Like they get it. It's crazy that like animals can understand that kind of level. And this is so important for their development that it's like been built into them, and it's built into us the same way. So I think, it's especially important for kids. And I think that games have a much bigger role they should play in education, to give you that kind of self-driven learning where you're like motivated, like, oh, I want to go explore this. I want to do this. I want to do this, They're the ones pulling the information versus like having it pushed on them. And I think there could be a lot more of that in the education space. So that's why I really love games as an educational medium.
Mm-hmm. What have you learned so far, seeing how people interact with your game or games? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Eco is especially interesting because we let people host their own world. So there's like thousands of these worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And each one, they make their own government, they make their own economy, they mint their own currency and like decide how it's distributed and taxed and like spent. And you just see a ton of differences in how people approach that. What's really funny, the thing I always notice is when Europeans and Americans play in the same server, they always fight over taxes. The Europeans want more taxes. The Americans don't want any taxes.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny how like often that happens. So you see people's kind of, political biases or just their their own beliefs that come out in these in the act of play is really, really fascinating to see. And that's kind of what the game is about too, is there's not really like villains in the game. Like we are our own villains, right? Of like, oh, we can't figure this out, so that society's going to fail, or we're going to like destroy the ecosystem,
right?
Or we're going to fail to shoot down the meteor that's going to hit the planet. That is another aspect of the game,
for sure.
So yeah, that's I like exploring that kind of complexity of like, other people, you're collaborating with them, but at the same time, this like competition arises, and what do you do with that? It's like tragedy of the commons, the game. That's how we think of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically a simplified version of a modern society, like a very stripped down, simple version, because it doesn't have as many variables.
Yeah.
But it still has this. People from a real culture come into this world and creating this sub-mini like world or something like that.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's what games do really well, is they take like the system of infinite complexity that is life, and like they distill it into like, numbers or like system, like things that you can grasp.
Yeah.
You think like an RPG of like, oh, your charisma is 7 and your HP is 12. It's like you take all those factors that in real life would correspond to your charisma, and you like distill it into a number so you can understand this.
Right.
So I think that just gives you a model, to understand the world. And that's so important for being able to like make predictions and like understand what's going on. So games just like provide that in such a great way, and it's fun process.
And with, let's say, exponential tech and us feeling like it's harder and harder to predict something, this approach to modeling, do you think it's still valid? Like it's still better than any other approaches to predicting what the outcome of the future is going to be?
Yeah, I think models are just kind of inherent to what even intelligence and consciousness is. It's like you form a model in your head and you work with that model, right? Like everything we experience, we're just perceiving from our senses and recreating in our minds as these like models of things. So yeah, that's kind of all we have. Like that's the main tool, I think. So like continuing to use that to understand, how does the world work? How do we apply this stuff? But yeah, in terms of just the rapidness with things are changing, it makes it really hard to apply past models.
Sure.
So yeah, that's a difficult one to navigate.
Where does intuition come in here? Are we completely ignoring it? Because then we can just outsource it to the model, basically.
Right. Yeah. Well, I would say what is intuition? Like, where does intuition come from? And I would say it's like a product of these kind of internal models, internal representations that you have, that you kind of have this innate understanding. It's not even like to the level of your consciousness, but from your past experience, you have this, this feeling of like, oh, there's something not right with this situation, or like, oh, this person's okay. Like I don't think that it's coming from anywhere like outside of our experience. I think it is like a distillation of our experience in a way.
Basically, all of the intuition is based only on the senses that we have, like the known senses that we have, you're saying?
Well, known or unknown. I mean, maybe there's some other inputs in there. But like, yeah, I think that it's a product of our experiences. I don't know. It really touches on like these deeper questions of like, what even is consciousness? How does consciousness exist, right? Like that's the one thing we know exists because we experience it. and yet we have no idea how it works. We're creating computers now. We're like, are they conscious? I don't know. Like, maybe they are. Like, there's no test you can tell if something is conscious. So there is forces there that we like don't understand, or there's some kind of effect there that we don't understand. This idea of like, we're like trillions of neurons or whatever in our brain, but we have this singular sense of self. Where does that come from? How does that even possible? So
Right.
I think there's plenty of room for like new discoveries and new things that might explain intuition in like a deeper way.
Yeah, I believe that we do have other senses that are not the known kind of senses. That's where, let's say, you can argue people get insights and downloads of novel information that they didn't really were interested in or read it anywhere. It just came through, and they were able to wrap language around it and verbalize it and spill it out into this world. So our body is almost like this antenna that's picking up frequencies that we're not aware, but we can't even measure them, but our body's still capable.
Yeah, some kind of conduit. I see an analog to that in like ad targeting. Like the targets I get for ads, it's like they somehow understand me at this level that's spooky. I had this experience the other day where I was like cleaning my bathroom, and there's like a spot between the tiles. I was like, oh, I need a little brush. It's like a corner scrubbing brush.
Yeah.
And then like later that day, an ad for a corner scrubbing brush appeared in my Instagram. It's like, how in the hell did it like perfect that so well?
Wow. Yeah.
But yeah, it's like
You just thought about it without.
Yeah, I didn't even say anything, so it couldn't have been listening to me. I mean, maybe it detected that I bought cleaning products recently or something, or that I bought like a different kind of brush recently. So there's all these like signals going around. It's kind of the universe. Like AI is that antenna picking up these like infinite signals from the world and like turning it into advertisements for you. But I think the human mind kind of works in a similar way, that like all these signals come in and this kind of magic happens, and we, have these intuitions that come out of it.
Yeah. Wow. You said AI is this like ultimate advertising machine. I hope that that's not the ultimate way how we use AI, though.
Yeah, it's really a dystopian kind of take on it. I think that we're just going to use AI in all kinds of ways. It's going to be used for advertising to make it like unimaginably good at like convincing you of stuff and like showing you stuff. But, all kinds of other uses as well.
Yeah. Bringing back to the conversation to the game, I want to dig a little bit deeper. What's the ultimate vision for the game? What's the best case scenario that you working towards?
Right. In terms of development?
In terms of development, where could this project be as it evolves? Like, what's the trajectory of the evolution of that?
Yeah. That's what we're working on right now. It's kind of our next steps. So the game's in early access right now. And we plan to ship V1 towards the end of the year. And then after that, we want to build these connected worlds. So after Eco, there will be Exo, which is it's like a foreign planet that you have to terraform. It's this barren planet that you're building up. And Eco and Exo can be connected. So you could send a rocket ship to this world and like bring your friends and like, send things back and forth between these two. Starting to build out this kind of like universe of different simulated worlds where each one of them has this life of their own. They have different systems that they do, and allow players to kind of craft their own worlds and put them into this network. So yeah, I mean, the word that bounces around for that is like some kind of metaverse, like a bottom-up metaverse. I mean, I don't really use that word because it's so confusing as to what it actually means. People think VR or something. It doesn't necessarily have to have VR. Right. But just that core idea of these like living places where you have identity, you have history, you have connections, you're doing something meaningful to your life. I think there's a huge potential for that.
So help me understand. So Eco has basically sub-worlds. There are like a bunch of mini planets that people occupy, and you call them servers?
Yeah, servers are every server's its own world. So players
world.
Can just say, I want to host my own world, and they spin up their own world, and now this world is there, and people can join it, and they like install mods so they can customize it, or they like set the rules, or like invite their friends, curate the community. So all of these worlds are very like curated by the administrators. by the
Right.
people who started. They're usually like they love the game and they want to like have their own kind of world that they experiment with.
And the starting point is always the same, or is it randomized in any way?
Yeah, it's this pure wilderness. It is a random like layout world, but it's
Yeah.
basically like no human development, just the ecosystem and plants.
Yeah.
And you start harvesting resources and building society through that.
And what's the time frame of the evolution that you can accomplish in one server in one world?
So the time crunch that we give is beginning of the game. There's a meteor. It's like circling the planet, and it's going to impact it
Uh-huh.
in 30 real life days. So you have 30 real life days to like take society from the early days to present day, such that you have technology that you can stop it from happening. And you build like an array of lasers, and you can like shoot it down, basically.
Basically, the whole human evolution is the time frame from like day zero to being modernized society.
Yeah.
Interesting. And what are the different ways how you've seen people develop the world? Like there are probably more distinct directions that people take, or is it all fairly similar? They're all trying to accomplish the same goal, and the development happens to be somewhat similar.
They're all pretty different. I mean, they all use the tools that we kind of provide.
Yeah.
Like you can make laws in the game, and then that determines what's allowed, and it'll actually restrict players. But in terms of like what types of societies they create, there's a lot of range. It's kind of all the range of like different governments you see. Like there might be a communist one where like all property is shared, and like there's like wealth taxes, and like it spreads the money out. Or there might like be purely capitalist ones where like you can corner the market and like build a monopoly on stuff.
Right.
So we really give people the freedom to kind of explore and have those different experiences. And I think it's a success if you play this game and you make a society that is so like dysfunctional and messed up that like it collapses and the world ends up getting destroyed by the meteor.
Yeah.
Like you kind of have that experience like, oh, why did that happen? What was it that we couldn't like agree on? So yeah.
Are you able to measure basically the success of that society, any particular small society somehow?
Yes, there is, do they destroy the meteor or not is the big one, but
Right.
also like you can make culture in the game. And culture is like you can create these pictures. We're going to add where you can like make architecture and sculptures and stuff. And that's also kind of a measure of success of, it's not just all about work and research and development. There's like this culture aspect that fuels things too.
And do you have some kind of data around what type of societies tend to be more successful?
We don't really have that kind of data, but I think it's the ones where people are most willing to kind of understand others and compromise or like collaborate and not just, think outside their own viewpoints a little bit, and be able to make concessions kind of. Because you have cases where, like if you're a woodcutter in the game, right, and your business is chopping down trees, and then you upgrade your tools. Now you got a chainsaw, you can chop down whole forests. And then the rest of the world might be like, hey, we're about to kill off this forest, which is gonna like become a big problem for our food supply and our farms and everything. And the woodcutter's like, oh, what are you talking about? It's fine. Like I don't see a problem.
Right.
So even though they have the same goal, they run into these like, conflicts. So if you can navigate those conflicts better, then you're more likely to succeed. You kind of have to think outside of your own bubble.
I mean, that's kind of what's happening in the world also. Everyone is playing, not everyone, like there's subgroups of people that are playing their own games, optimizing for different things, thinking that this is the right thing to optimize for, but for others or at a different scale, the optimization could be completely off.
Yeah, totally. And I think the world could benefit from a lot more like, thinking outside of your own kind of bubble. Optimizing for the greater good, but it's easier said than done.
Right. What have you, are you guys getting some feedback, some reviews, people sharing their opinions about how that's impacting maybe their life, like this game, or just the whole experience? What is it like for people to participate?
Yeah, we've had some really, really nice reviews in that regards. Excuse me. we had a reviewer give us a game of the year when we launched in early access, and his quotes in that article were that, there's nobody teaching you what to do in eco. You're kind of like, you're experiencing it and figuring it out, and in these systems that can really only be simulated in a game. Like, you're creating an economy and you make a currency, and like, how do you use this currency as a tool? That's really rare to see in a game. Usually in games it's like, the currency exists and you spend this gold to buy this, and that's that. It's not really simulating the wider, like, holistic aspect of it. So our game, like, you can spend currency, you can make currency and spend it in stores, but like, how do you distribute it and what is it worth?
Yeah.
And so this reviewer was like, oh yeah, we learned so much about like just economic theory by like trying to set up our town in this video game. So that was really cool to see. We also see a lot of people playing with their like family members, like their kids or their girlfriend. And they're joining forces to like achieve this goal, and it's a really like bonding experience, and they're like learning stuff while they do it. So yeah, there's been some great feedback.
And that's very. So I was going to ask what did you input, like, because you really had to think through the whole evolution, and let's say even giving people a saw, like that's one variable that you're introducing. You have to have the whole range of tools and things that people can do. Yeah. How did you come up with the list?
We have a giant spreadsheet of the tech tree where it's like every type of item and object, and we've really just grown it over the years. I mean, we've been in early access for a number of years, so we start small and then we just kind of add like, oh, we want to add blacksmithing, or we want to add like this rock crushing object and mining, and how does this all connect? So just kind of iterating it over time, and then constantly going back and like balancing when we see player feedback. That's one of the advantages of the game being early access, is we can make changes and get it out there, and people will like, hey, this works, this doesn't work, can we have more of this? Yeah. And their feedback's super valuable because they're spending like hundreds of hours in the game. So we really try to connect to the community to understand that stuff and use it to grow the systems.
So what are the main variables then? The different tech tools, behavioral patterns, like, oh, you can do this, this, that. What other things? What?
Yeah.
Resources, like maybe how much resources you have, or what the
behavior
of them?
There's kind of tons of different inputs. There's like, natural resources that you can get, and then you can get tools to like gather them. You can create like stations to process them into other like things, and then you start performing research, which unlocks new tools and new objects and new research. So there's this whole like research tree.
Yep.
And everything you're doing is kind of impacting the environment as well. So there's this like, secondary effects of like, if you strip mine this place, or you're going to mess up the like life that lives there.
Yeah.
So understanding that becomes an important part of it also.
What have you learned yourself, like any like aha moments for your life, just observing how people play the game?
Yeah. One that comes to mind is this the person that had a negative experience, actually. They were like trying to make a business selling like furniture, carpets in the game. And they had their store, and like some other group was like collaborating against them, or like was more successful and ran them out of business. And they got upset and quit the game and like left a negative review. So it's not necessarily unexpected, but it's also like, well, not everybody kind of is going to see the like bigger picture of that experience. They just know like, damn it, my furniture store went out of business. I hate you. I hate this game. So, you hope people that are going to make that intellectual leap and kind of grow, but it doesn't always happen. So the more we can kind of do to help that, I think, the better. Kind of provide them, an easier learning curve for understanding what to do, understanding their options better. Just trying to make it a more inviting experience. Yeah. That's been one takeaway.
Would you say one of the things that your team is optimizing for is educating people about like how to live a sustainable, good life, or?
Indirectly, I think. I think I really didn't want it to be like preachy as a game. Like I'm not the type of person who's like, oh, shame on you for doing this non-ecological thing. It's more about understanding the systems as a whole, and like, how do we solve these problems, not just as an individual like picking up their litter, but like, how do we structure society in a way that you can do this? And this is a game where you can actually structure society and see the impacts of it, which is really hard to do in real life. So having that experience and just kind of, I hope that it opens people's minds to the idea of like, this world is created by people, and I'm a person, I can like contribute to what this is. I'm not just existing in this like static thing.
Right.
This is a very dynamic space that, and kind of building that mindset, I think is, something I hope the game achieves.
I like this analogy of the Earth is like a spaceship. Everyone is a crew member. There are no passengers. There are no passengers. And it sounds like in that game, very similar.
Yeah, totally. We're all in this together and like figuring out success.
Yeah, because I think in the current way the human society is run, there are a lot of passengers, or they consider themselves passengers. They don't have to really do much for the planet, for the collective.
Yeah. Yeah, I think everyone kind of has their own take on it, their own path for it. And there's not even agreement on like what is the right thing to do either.
Right.
So it's hard to like criticize anybody for like, you're not doing enough without,
or not doing the right thing or something.
Yeah. It's hard to know what that is, and I think that you need to have some humility in that and kind of try to understand others a lot more in general. But yeah, it's a lot of challenges we're facing today, especially. I think the most interesting thing is like, people analyze the problems that the world has in a static way. They're like, oh, we're gonna pollute the atmosphere. If we go at current rates, the atmosphere is gonna be dead and we're gonna like destroy the planet. It's like, well, what's gonna happen like 10 years from now with technology, right? Like, that's gonna completely change all these things. And you look back in time and you see this, like back in the 70s, they're like, oh, the world will be dead by the 90s because of this and this. It's like, well, no, but we changed it and this happened. So in a sense, it's good that they're raising that issue so that we can address it. But it's also like, okay, understand that there are solutions, and that we should be solution focused,
right?
Not just like doom and gloom focused.
I agree. Yeah. Would you consider yourself an optimist, or?
I think so. I mean, you got to be like a cautious optimist, because I think it's easy to get yourself into, cause problems that you didn't anticipate. I think we see that with a lot of politics, really, where they're like, they do legislation that has one intention and it has the complete opposite effect over time, and costs a lot of money and does the opposite of what you intended it to do. So that's a really common thing. But in general, I'm pretty optimistic. I do worry about the trends with what is going to happen with AI. It's just happening so fast, and it's going to completely transform like the way we live pretty rapidly. Look at the advancements that are happening now. We're in the middle of AI takeoff, where AI is like, accelerating so rapidly. And as soon as the AI gets to a point where like the AI can start programming itself, which doesn't seem that far off, I think we're really going to see some like explosive growth that's going to be super disrupting to society. So yeah, I try to be optimistic about that, but there's a lot of incentives that kind of drive people to make decisions that aren't going to lead to a good outcome. So yeah, it's a big focus right now, or big worry, I think.
On the topic of AI, what are some things that you're excited about that you see AI is about to bring to us, or maybe already brought, and something that you're cautious about and things that could really go wrong?
Sure. Well, I mean, just in the game industry, it's basically going to make content become free. Like if we need like a new object for a game, we just say, hey, make this object for me, and it'll be able to create this like beautiful object in the style that we want. And, so that's currently like a big part of our development, is creating stuff. And it'll also do the same for code, so that we can just be like, hey, we need this new system, or like, hey, fix this bug. So it really just accelerates things like an incredible degree as that stuff starts to crop up, and it's already like happening. And you just project into the future, like it's gonna completely change how all that operates. So that's good and bad in a way. I mean, it gives us a lot more kind of leeway to like create stuff. the things that give me most hesitation are just, yeah, we don't really understand this intelligence that's being created. It's not a human intelligence, right? Like ChatGPT already, you can ask it any question in the world. It'll know everything from like the peculiarities of ASP.NET Core programming, which I've been asking it about recently,
Nice.
to like, the Big Bang Theory or whatever, and everything in between, the most like crazy minutia. It's just like a person that knows everything, and it can answer you instantly. It can answer millions of people instantly.
Yes.
Like, that is kind of a scary thing that is that smart.
Yeah.
And this is just like the beginning of how smart it's going to get. So where that goes is these things become more capable, they become more like agents, that they're kind of guiding their own actions more, or like being able to plan and do decisions. We're going to see some weird stuff, I think. And then we don't really understand these AI creations. So I'm kind of sympathetic to, there's a lot of people out there who are like, oh, AI is, it's going to kill us all. I don't know. I don't know that it's that obvious that that'll happen, but I think that it will definitely be disrupting, and we should think about that.
What would you say is your best case scenario future, considering all of this exponential developments?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like, we have this ability, say that we create an AI that does all labor, even the creative labor, like creates art, which it's doing now. Like, what do we do then? And one thing that kind of gives me hope is the analogy of like chess. Like, chess for a while was like, one of the is dominated by humans, of course, and it was one way to like a competition of your intelligence that we were at the top of. And that has not been the case for a long time now with chess. Like, computers have outstripped us since like the 80s or something. But people still play it, and they still love it, and they still have like tournaments, and like it's more popular than ever now. So I think if we will have to give up that notion of humanity being the best at something, but just still enjoy it because we're humans and we're engaging in that experience. But at the same time, we're giving so much control to AI to run the rest of our lives. That's pretty risky as well. So, how do we keep tabs on that is pretty tricky. But I think there's a good case to be made. I mean, I like science fiction for this reason, that it explores these ideas of like, what is the best case scenario? There's this series called the Culture series, where it's like far future, post-scarcity society, where like AI kind of runs everything. And where do humans fit into this? And it's really interesting to see that like kind of picture and think about, okay, maybe there's, this is how it could work. But yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, that's the question I often ask myself, like, what type of future would I like to align all of my efforts towards? And the future that I see that is very desirable for me is, we are technologically advanced. We do have this really big force that sustains abundant lifestyle for everyone. We are integrated in nature and community. We almost go back into the village type living with the upgraded cognition, with the upgraded tools that we have. In fact, I see the most advanced technology is the one that's least noticeable. So if you just look at the humans in the future, let's say 1,000 years from now, or maybe 500 years from now, you see them living somewhat of a primitive lifestyle. But what's different is all of the menus that happens in front of their eyes or something like that.
Right. Yeah, maybe we go back to that, just relying on each other and having the sense of meaning that comes from that, which I think a lot of people kind of live that way anyway. It's like their life is about their family, and they're like, their pets, and like running their home and things like that. Like, it doesn't matter necessarily if machines are like the best at art and the best at music and the best at everything, because you still have that like human experience. It's meaningful. So, yeah.
It almost like there might be happening some kind of a split between intelligence is going into the infinity, like it becomes more and more intelligent, but there is a physical body that is designed to be grounded in nature, and we're not meant, like the body is not designed to live in a skyscraper, for example. You need like some kind of grounding.
Yeah, I mean, we're physical beings that are a product of like, our evolution. How do we hold on to that? Do we want to hold on to that? One interesting direction, like, Neuralink and that idea of like upgrading your cognition as a way of like, to keep up with AI, we're going to need to like become part AI or like improve our own minds to reach, to stay at the top of the food chain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also an interesting path. And I think we can do both. Like, we can have people that are like, they're going to go that direction and like upgrade their minds and bodies and like try to like
Mm-hmm.
stay at this like peak level. And then you'll have people who are just like, I'm just going to enjoy life and like
Right.
live with my family or friends or travel or do all this stuff, create art. And it doesn't matter if some AI could do it better because like I made it and here it is. And
Mm-hmm.
that's important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also going to be crazy if we get to the point where we can live pretty much infinitely or much longer, let's say 300, 500 years. That's going to be, I do think that is possible. Would I want to live 300 years? I don't know. I would want to live like 120 maybe. That would be nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely like the option to like not die, like
Mm-hmm.
until if and whenever like I've lived enough. But yeah, I think that we're probably going to see that in our lifetimes. Just like it'll be a bridge to a bridge. Like we'll extend life a bit and we'll extend life a bit. And then eventually we'll like be able to like completely stave off death,
Totally.
And just that changes a lot about your thinking from day to day. Like
Mm-hmm.
if I told you, hey, we're going to live like 1 billion years, does
Right.
that change like how you live today? Right? Like, okay, maybe it does. Like if I'm not planning to like have this normal lifespan that everyone in history has had, what doors does that open?
Mm-hmm.
So I think about that and like, yeah, I think that we're going to have to constantly be learning and evolving if we want to, have these like extra long lifespans and, evolving ourselves. That's kind of where the Neuralink idea comes into play. It's like the progress and growth is part of this process. Like I wouldn't want to live 300 years doing the exact same thing every day. So how we can integrate progress into that becomes more important.
Mm-hmm. I think we're already starting to see the signs of us shifting. Let's say before this idea was much stronger, where in your 30s you should be doing this, in your 40s you're supposed to be doing that, and then by 80s you're like retired, and I think that's already being redefined. Like we see older people living like a very young lifestyle, hanging out with youngsters. It's more available now, and the mindset shift is happening too.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a product of just like society is different now, and like there's not this rush to like settle down and have kids instantly. So I was just reading on the way in here, right, like tweets about the catastrophe of demographic collapse. Like there's not enough people are having kids, the like replacement rate isn't happening. And I don't know. It's weird to think of that as a problem. I'm old enough to remember when the opposite was the thing people were worried about. Like,
I mean, I think there's still a big portion of people who think the opposite today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's too many people. We need fewer people. I mean, between the two, I think a better future is having more people that are like amply supported and like living good lives. Just because that's what's meaningful for us is like human lives are meaningful. So more of them would have more meaning. Excuse me.
For sure. I meant to also ask you about this whole simulation idea. So do you think we'll ever get to the point where we're able to simulate the experience to the point where your senses are not able to tell the difference?
Probably, yeah. I mean, it might be a while before we get there. Actually, have you tried the Vision Pro?
I haven't yet, but I would love to.
Yeah, you should check that out because it's kind of almost there in some ways. Like, you put it on and you see a video of your surroundings, and the resolution of it is so high that like it almost looks like exact reality. If you really look close, you can see like pixels. But it's very hard to perceive. And the refresh rate is really good, so that like there's not like choppy, and the lag is really low. So like you see your surroundings like fast enough that I'm looking at my hand and moving my hand around. It feels like my hand,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's a video of my hand.
Mm-hmm.
So they've really, I think, demonstrated that leap is within our reach, that eventually we'll be able to have these kind of systems that simulate our senses in a way that, is indistinguishable.
And from the perspective of human connection, do you think, I pose this question to myself often too, so you have two experiences. One is you're sitting in front of a physical, real person and you're having a dialogue with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one is a fully simulated experience where you can't tell the difference. Do you think there will potentially be, my theory, I mean, I don't know, but my theory is that we will start noticing the subtle delta of the atrophied potentially senses that we haven't really developed because we didn't need to have them to navigate the world, but they're more like subtle senses of like related to intuition or related to those downloads or something like that sense that we don't really use.
That we'll lose that by having virtual connections.
I think we might start noticing it more if we fully simulate the experience and then we say, oh, the physical experience is still, there's something still special about that. And what is that? And so as you keep comparing it, it's like, oh, I'm feeling and like some kind of energetic presence of some, I don't know. That's just a total theory. I don't know if that's.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many aspects to like the experience of like sitting next to someone. To try to simulate all of those into your senses is, a monumental task. So, I mean, if and when we ever achieve that, there'll be a long period where it's like we don't have the whole experience there. And so there will be that thing missing that like it's going to be better to be in person with someone for a long time still, I think. But it's going to get higher and higher fidelity, and eventually it opens up doors for really great experiences. Like you can have like that almost perfect experience of sitting next to somebody who's like on the other side of the world and like having a conversation, which is pretty cool, and it shrinks the like distances between us. But will it become a substitute for like physical interaction? I don't know. Maybe in the like far future, it could become like even more like intense an experience, like more connected even, because like you can have additional kind of senses that are being like connected to you. So yeah, I think there's some interesting possibilities there.
How important for you is human connection? Is that something you think about building the game or just in your life, attempt to connect to others more? Is that important?
Totally. I mean, our game is really about that. It's like navigating human connections in the context of this shared challenge. But the social connections are really like key to the experience. And I think it just gives so much meaning to life. I mean, personally, like that's, what's most rewarding in life is being close to like your family and friends and like making connections with new people and understanding, learning from them. I think, that is one of the best things about life. So it's definitely something to prioritize, that we don't lose it as we continue developing technology.
Do you have ideas how we can amplify that even further with technology in the future? How can we use technology to promote
human connection? I think there's tons of stuff that we can do. I think it's already like the fact that, I can talk to my mom and brother on the phone at any time, or like we have a little chat where we're like sharing stuff that, if that didn't exist, it'd be a lot harder to have that connection. And it introduces kind of new types of connections of like, people that I met and I follow them on Instagram and now I see stories of their life and kind of get to know them. So they're not like a friend, like they would never send me like pictures or I wouldn't send them pictures.
Yeah.
But like you see each other's stuff and you're like, oh, we have this in common. Oh, so you can kind of evolve. So it kind of simulates, I guess this is a thing that's similar to like if you live in a village and you just like see somebody around and they're like doing stuff, but it kind of takes that experience and like gives it to you in a digital form. So yeah, I think there's all kinds of interesting stuff that can happen with human connection. I mean, through games especially. I really love board games, like getting people around a table and like playing this game. You just learn so much about people and their like strategies. You have to like think about how they're thinking about things. And that's one of my favorite things to do. Is like puts it in this, game experience of like socializing.
Because you could also argue that let's say those social media tools actually disconnect people. The deep, meaningful connections are stripped away. All that's left is just on the level of the ego, just comparing lives, and they're not really like deeply connected.
Totally. Yeah. I think in the pathological case, and probably even the most common case, that's true. Like this, this, I think of it as like a tool that you can use, or the tool can use you. Like if you're not being conscious of like, what am I doing? Am I just scrolling reels endlessly and like feeling like crap because my life doesn't look like these other people? Or am I like seeing new friends and family and their like hobbies and their stuff that they're doing?
Yeah.
So you're given so much power to craft your own environment. And I think if you don't use that, it kind of default shifts you to this like, lower mindset. Like if I go to my Instagram search bar, it shows me all this stuff that's like, I don't care about this. Why does it decided that like this is the most important thing to me? And it'll like feed it to you. I also, the one I always get, it's so weird. The Instagram algorithm has decided I love car crashes. So I always see like crazy like accidents and stuff in my like Instagram feed. And I'm like, wow, that's weird. Also, that crash was really cool, but I don't want to see it. You kind of got to like have this layer on top of your base instinct of like, oh, I want this, but like, I also want to like make healthy decisions, do the right thing.
Yeah, I agree about the comment you said, whether you use technology or technology uses you. I think it's becoming potentially harder with more advanced technology that really understand the psychology of people and how to feed more advertising or how to sell you more stuff. It's harder and harder to resist that stuff.
Yeah, they're getting really good at it. Like they can identify exactly what what your weaknesses are in a way. So yeah, I mean it would be great if these algorithms were like working in our favor and like guiding us to our better angels. But that's not as profitable. So it happens less often. But yeah, there's been some efforts of like exposing these algorithms to like public, making them open source, so you can kind of see like what is this thing that's like guiding what I see. I think that's a good direction, that we need more of that.
Transparency.
Because it can be a great tool for like surfacing things you should learn about. YouTube is actually pretty good at this. Like I get on YouTube and I just see the most cool like scientific documentaries and like interesting math stuff. So it can be good, I think, but it's often not.
Right. I think conscious use of technology is something I also promote, promoting deep human connection, authentic expression, and choosing, how we use those tools, but also choosing the actual tools, not only how we use the tool. Sometimes you make a decision not to use the tool at all. Like people can sometimes disconnect completely.
I mean, if it's not serving you, cut it off completely.
Right.
It's kind of annoying because then I can't message them on the platform. I have some friends that do this.
Right.
But it's part of crafting your own like experience. You got to do that. You got to be active in this world.
You touched on, earlier on the topic of the metaverse, and I know that it's like come in waves. There was a big wave of everyone being obsessed about it, and then there was kind of a winter, and then it sounds like now it's starting to reemerge again. Maybe Vision Pro is one of the catalysts to that, or other new versions of VR headsets.
Yeah, I think people got really excited about it in the crypto sense, that they could speculate on it monetarily, and so it really like blew up and then crashed. But the whole time there's been this kind of like constant iteration of like actual meaningful like connections that people are building, and a lot of companies are kind of going in this direction of just becoming more connected. I think that's what the metaverse is just more connections and higher fidelity connections. So like Epic Games, creators of Fortnite, just announced this massive multi-billion-dollar deal with Disney where they're gonna like make all their Disney IP in like worlds inside of Fortnite. And I think that's really interesting because it's like now these worlds are connected. You can move between these. So that's a big step in the metaverse. I think Roblox does it really interesting, where it kind of democratizes it, that anybody can make a game and connect it to this wider world. And it's something we want to do as well. Of like this idea of like you're creating these communities, and you're kind of crafting them and curating them, but now you can connect them to other communities as well. So in terms of like VR or like Vision Pro, things like that, that's just one way to kind of access these worlds.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of ways that you can access them potentially through multiple ways. You know, you get on your computer, you put on the headset, you get on your phone. So I'm interested in these like persistent kind of digital places, and then how you access them can just be like additional kind of plugins to that.
What does it give? What benefit having those worlds give to us? Like, why is that good, or why are you excited about that?
I think it increases human connection, for one, kind of what we were talking about before. You know, if these worlds are done in a way that they relate to reality and to your life in some way, it gives you experiences that you couldn't get otherwise. Like, you know, you can't have the experience of like starting a town and setting up laws and like taxes and stuff in the real world. But in a game world, you can do that. And if you do that, you have like a better understanding of how that stuff works in reality, you know, because you've lived it. There's something really valuable about being able to live an experience versus just like reading about it. You know, you have that experience. So I think that's kind of the core of what games give us.
You're saying, I had a follow up to that. Yeah. Over time, as we're spending more and more time in the digital domains, do you feel like, do you think there will be a point where we'll hit the limit of this is maybe already are, we have that limit already where it's unhealthy. We're recognizing that we're spending way too much time surfing the digital and we need more physical experiences.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case for a lot of people. I mean, it goes back to thinking about, you know, crafting your environment, deciding and not just letting it like use you, right? So like you use these digital experiences to enhance your physical experiences, you know, and it's definitely seen that, you know, for me, like connecting to new friends, getting to know new people. It's such a great avenue for that, that, you know, without it in the way that life is these days where everything's very remote, we don't have these like community places like we might have like 50 years ago. Like digital serves that purpose. So I think if you cut it out entirely, you will negatively impact your like in real life experience as well. But at the same time, if you use it too much, you're going to negatively impact your in real life experience too. So I think it's all, you know, it's all in the details of how you use it.
Do you have any ideas how to like build a bigger bridge between the physical and the digital?
Yeah, deeper connections, more higher fidelity worlds, better representation. And that's something we kind of think about. We recently introduced a feature where if you play the game and you have a webcam, it will watch your face and match your expressions to your character in the game. So if you're like smiling or waving, your character will like do the same, and like lip sync you. So it just connects you like physically more to other people in that world. You can like see what, you know, they just feel like more of a person when you can like see their animations like that. So I think there's little things like that you can do. And, you know, you can scale that up to like, you know, technologies that like scan you and put you in like a 3D space with another person, and like you feel you're right there, or you know, you're having these interesting like interactions in a game sense. So I think there's all kinds of entry points, all kinds of bridges that we can take into it. I mean, maybe it's things like the Vision Pro, or maybe it's just like, you know, the way we use our phones or the way that we play games. Yeah, lots of opportunities.
Do you see the future where the majority of entities, or I guess you can call in digital space, there are avatars that are like non-human form, or do you think it's going to be more human form?
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it stands to reason. Like once AI becomes cheap and ubiquitous, there'll be more of them than there'll be of us if there's agents. So I could imagine that kind of future happening for sure. AI is such a weird beast because it's not like humans where you have like individuals. I mean, you could create it such that it's that way, but these individuals could be like partially merged, or they could like share like a hive brain, or they could have this like, you know, kind of dynamic consciousness that grows and like shrinks, or you can have like a mega one that's like, you know, billions combined. So there's going to be all kinds of like new types of intelligences that we have to like understand and deal with in the future, I think. And it's hard to imagine what that's going to be like.
I'm also interested in seeing humans deciding what character they are playing in that space. And maybe it's not, oh, I'm only going to show up as this character. It's probably going to be a very dynamic, depending what environment you're in. You're going to decide what character or what avatar. But do you? Because I see a lot of people are using avatars that are not human form. They're like cartoon characters or something like that. Do you see that's continuing that path where people won't desire to show up in those virtual spaces as themselves?
I kind of see that. I mean, I think of it as like your identity is very craftable. Like you can decide, you can tune it a lot more. I see that in the real world too, like the way that like gender fluidity is a thing that didn't exist like 50 years ago, and now people are considering like, oh, I can like change these things about myself that were once fundamental, you know, and just I think that's kind of a human desire to like, you know, create your identity how you're recognized, and games give you that ability. So I don't know that people will just bring in their default identity as much. I do think there's benefits to that, because then you have a closer connection to who you are in each kind of realm. You know, there's less like artifice of like one is like a facade, one is the real one or whatever. But at the same time, I do think it's interesting to be able to like craft your identity like that.
Be more fluid with the form that you're occupying, or
flexibility there. I mean, you have ultimate flexibility in the digital space. Like you could be a flying whale or whatever you want to be, you know?
Right. You could argue that actually disconnects you from your essence, which is partially, or that's contained in your body. I don't know, something like that. That you are, everything else in the digital is an illusion in a way, and the further out illusion is, the further away you are from yourself, which makes you less makes you more disconnected and depressed, and I don't know, like something like that.
Yeah, I think if we abandon the things that make us human in favor of like facsimiles, it's gonna be depressing and like, you know, not good necessarily.
Because you almost like giving people permission to not attend their physical body, and you say, oh, that doesn't matter. You can just be whoever you want. But in reality of things, we are still being contained, and we don't see any evidence that that's not going to be the case anytime soon.
Yeah. I think there is a danger in that, of just kind of losing yourself into these worlds and not like keeping that connection to your like physical self as much. Yeah, I think... I mean, when I play games, I usually like try to bring myself into it or play with people I know. So it is more connected to the rest of my life. It's not an escape. And one thing I think about games is like they don't need to be an escape. They can kind of be the opposite. They can be an engagement, like a deeper engagement with people. So games are kind of, you know, categorized as an escape from reality, but they don't always have to be like that.
One experience that I would love to create is, it's a fully simulated real experience where people are there with their own bodies, with their own, and everything is super accurately reconstructed, like your gestures and your eyesight, and you get to sit in front of other human, kind of like we're doing now, and look in the eyes, and you see that it's them, even though it is digitally curate, like a digitally created experience. I think the closer we bring it to the real one, the more actual connection that we potentially can unlock there. Yeah,
I think so. I think there's a lot gained in like the little nuances, like eye contact, or like how you're looking at each other, or like little gestures, and we're like rapidly closing in on like being able to do those really well. So it would be interesting for sure.
Yeah, part of this setup, by the way, was me attempting to create a virtual experience where I put the TV here in front of so it's all about scaling and getting the scales and proportions right. Because usually when you're on Zoom, you're on small screen and you don't really perceive that they're there, just because the perception of space is all off. Like they're over there. They're not even looking at the camera. But imagine if I'm sitting, so if there's a TV, you don't actually see me directly. You only see my reflection. You remember that we walked in together and I sat down here. That's why you kind of think that of combining the two.
Yeah.
But if there would be a picture, a crystal picture where you don't see the pixels as crystal as me, but I am somewhere else, how different would this experience be for you, right?
Right. Like if this mirror was a TV screen instead, and like you were like rendered in it. I mean, it could be pretty close to a similar experience theoretically. I think we have a ways to go before it actually gets there. But it's not far off. There's actually Lex Friedman's podcast. He interviewed Mark Zuckerberg in the metaverse, and that was pretty interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like what you're saying exactly happening there, which it's not the same as real life, but it makes things possible that aren't possible in real life. You can be together at a distance.
Yeah, I've had this idea for a while, even before they released the episode many years ago, where the future of those real simulated experiences is us having a full replica, like an avatar that you maybe even go to a place to create, or maybe later your device can just at home scan you and create you an avatar. But that avatar is being just animated on the other end. So you're only transmitting the coordinates, the delta of your, subtle expressions on your muscles, and then the rest is just re-rendered over there.
Totally. I mean, we do that at a crude way of like just transmitting the your facial expression in like a vector format,
right,
and then recreating it in your avatar,
right.
But yeah, you can just take the fidelity of that way up and get like all the nuances of like the crease in their smile or whatever.
Right, exactly. Another experience that I thought about, like I often do like stretching and yoga in front of the mirror, and I also believe that we have this energy centers, this chakras, and I thought, well, this would be cool too. As I'm looking into the mirror, into myself, I see myself perfectly clear, and additionally now I see anything additional, like energy centers or even my organs. If I'm like looking at myself, I see how much more awareness would it give to your body as you're stretching, as you're moving. Like let's say, I have a little discomfort in this area, and it can educate you like what exactly maybe potentially is happening there. It's like
right, interesting. It's like amplified reflection, like understanding yourself better, which I think is important to do.
To look at yourself like that. What are the other topics that you have been recently just wrapping your mind around and been kind of excited about?
Yeah, well, AI, of course, is the big one, because every day there's like a new breakthrough. So that one is the
crazy,
never-ending like fountain of interesting stuff. So just kind of understanding that, I spend a lot of time thinking about like how that's going to impact us.
For sure.
And I always try to discover, just like find good sources of input, like I was saying with the YouTube algorithm, that just like surfaces things to my mind of like, oh, there's this like interesting like mathematical like sequence that, like it's never something I would search out, but like because it's surfaced, it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. So there's a number of things like that.
Where do you get most of your information?
That's a good question. I guess it's kind of an amalgamation of a number of sources, online, like websites, like newspapers and whatnot, X, Twitter. That's been a good source lately. Just talking to friends, I guess. Newsletters that I sign up for. I'm part of a book club, so just like having new books all the time, reading.
What kind of books do you guys read in your book club?
We do a lot of like kind of societal stuff of like, understanding the world better and like where we're going and what is the future. Yeah.
How many people are in the book club?
There's like 10 or so here. So yeah.
Here, they're all local.
Yeah, it's the local one.
You guys get together in person.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Give me an example of a book that you read.
We read one called The Joke most recently. It was a novel about this guy who makes a joke in a communist society and is like ostracized for his life, basically. So yeah, that was one we read lately. We're reading one now called The Creative Way of Being, which is kind of like where creativity comes from and how to cultivate that.
Very cool.
So, yeah, if you want to join.
Amazing. Yeah. How long has it been going on?
I just recently moved to Miami, so I actually
Okay.
joined this one fairly recently. I had I used to live in Seattle, and I had one back there as well.
Okay.
But yeah, I think the book club's going a few months here, so pretty new.
Pretty new, right?
Mhm.
And then what type of people are in the book club?
It's kind of a mix of like tech people, crypto people, finance people, professionals generally. Um, yeah, people just curious about the world and like to talk about it, like to read.
And what's the format of the discussion? How do you guys talk about it?
It's pretty loose-ended where we just get up and, we meet together and just bring up topics that we found interesting or like passages that we highlighted and talk about those with people or like questions we had for others while we're reading the book. It really just adds a lot to the experience of reading a book to know that you're going to discuss it because then you're like, oh, this is interesting. I'll talk about this with my friends when I see them.
Nice.
So yeah, it increases the value of your reading, and it's also like a fun social thing.
And how long is each meetup, and how often?
Typically monthly. We read a book each month.
And then how long is the meeting itself?
Usually a couple hours, then it'll turn into dinner or something, and we'll just like hang
Nice.
out and yeah. It's
Cool. I don't think I've ever been part of. I mean, it's such a big thing in America. I grew up in Belarus, and I don't know if a book club was ever like a thing. I
Yeah.
don't remember anyone
Yeah.
mentioning it.
Highly recommend.
That's cool. Yeah. Awesome, man. I think this is a great maybe place to wrap up. Maybe mention where people can find you and any other final notes.
Sure, yeah. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just Google my name. Find our game if you Google Eco Game. And yeah, great conversation today. That was really fun.
Awesome, man. Yeah. Thank you for being here.